Now, at their best, video games are a fantastic fusion of art and science, a glorious collision of storytelling and technically sublime programming. And I know that we've all played a game and simply been blown away by a stunning mechanic, only to lament that this feature isn't available in more video games. And in the modern gaming era, the medium feels more accessible and open-ended than ever, but there's still so much work to be done, as evidenced by the fact that these 10 features aren't near ubiquitous. So let's take a look at them. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 incredible video game mechanics that should be everywhere, but aren't. Number 10. The story so far. Have you ever returned to a game after a couple of weeks, even months, and had absolutely no damn idea at all what was going on with the story? Well, in lengthy games with complex narratives, it is inevitable, and so it's always a relief when the game has at least the foresight to include a story recap to bring affected players back up to speed. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt offers a good example of this, with loading screens recounting the story up to this point, while Dragon Quest XI literally includes cutscenes summarizing everything that's happened so far. And yet both of these features for keeping players acquainted with the narrative are missing from so many story-heavy games. When you're dealing with an RPG conservatively clocking in at 50 hours, there's no reason not to include this quality of life feature, because it will help keep players with busy lives invested in the narrative and therefore far more likely to keep playing. Number 9. Speed up gameplay. Now, this is obviously massively dependent on the game, but where titles heavy on grinding or repetition are concerned, they should absolutely include the ability to speed gameplay up. The re-releases of Final Fantasy VII, 8 and 9, as well as the Zodiac Age re-release of Final Fantasy XII, allowed players to speed up gameplay as far as 4 times, ensuring grinding felt less like a soulless time sink and getting from A to B took up considerably less time overall. While there are carefully curated gameplay experiences where the methodical pace is precisely the point, the ability to alter the speed in combat and traversal heavy games should be considerably more prevalent. While PC players can simply use programs like Cheat Engine to alter the game's speed, that facility naturally isn't possible on consoles, and outside of RPGs, it's an official feature lacking in the overwhelming majority of video games. Though you absolutely shouldn't view a video game as merely a task to be completed as fast as possible, being able to speed your way through the more tedious sections would make it far easier to stick with games that are just a little too long for their own good. Number 8. Full accessibility controls. Now, options are a great thing in any video game, and while major strides have been made for accessibility in recent years, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. Accessibility can mean many things to many different people, but here are just some of the most requested features which should be absolutely commonplace across the medium. The Last of Us Part 2 has proven itself to be a shining beacon for accessibility gameplay, touting over 60 different settings, allowing players to fine-tune gameplay down to the most granular degree. From including visual and oral cues to remapping the entire control scheme, mitigating motion sickness, tweaking the difficulty of every facet of gameplay, and so on, Naughty Dog took accessibility seriously enough that blind gamers are able to beat the game entirely without assistance. Now, obviously, Naughty Dog is one of the biggest AAA studios on the planet, with considerably greater resources at their disposal than, say, a 5-person indie developer, but there's no real reason why other mega-budget AAA titles don't rock the same level of accessibility. And even in more basic terms, every single video game, no matter the project's size, should include features like a scalable interface and selectable text sizes, especially with so many people playing handheld on Switch and Steam Deck these days. Elsewhere, just make subtitles the default option if you're going to make players sit through a lengthy cinematic before giving them access to the options menu, and just let players adjust the various levels of sound mix independently, please. Allowing players to define gameplay parameters to reflect their own abilities should be a priority for anyone making games these days. And we're just going to say it, yes, Soulsborne games, they are not exempt from this. Because here's the thing, nobody's taking anything away from the hardcore set simply by giving a larger swathe of people options to play the game how they wish. Stop gatekeeping these games, guys. Number 7. Gyro controls. There's no denying that the Nintendo Wii popularized the idea of motion controls with the average gamer, and almost 20 years later, it's still a hugely popular feature, albeit far from a universal one. The Nintendo Switch and PlayStation 5 both allow gyro controls for a select number of games, for instance, using the controller to aim in the likes of Fortnite, Splatoon 3, and Horizon Forbidden West. It's a feature that many players swear by, given the potential for faster and more accurate aiming in action-heavy titles, and beyond that, it's just simply another fun option allowing people to play the game how they want. want. While Steam Deck owners can benefit from the handheld's ability to create custom gyro controls for any game in their library, in the mainstream gaming sphere, it still feels like gyro support isn't nearly strong enough. Microsoft has been dinged in the past for not putting a gyroscope in their Xbox controllers, despite being so shooter-heavy, and so hopefully they might finally fully embrace gyro for the next generation of Xbox controllers. Number 6. Mission Select. The ability to select and replay levels was far more common in the past, and while many linear games still do offer it, in an era defined less by levels and more by continuous open worlds, it's certainly more of a rarity. While there are outliers like Nier Automata, potato patata, RPGs in particular have a tendency to prevent the player from replaying a completed level or chapter. This can prove especially frustrating in games with missable content, where without a level select option, you're forced to start the game entirely from scratch in order to obtain a collectible or experience an alternate story path. Sure, it's a feature that's easier to implement in some games than others, but given that the overwhelming majority of games are divided into levels, chapters, or missions in some form, it's really not asking all that much to replay them at will. Number 5. The Nemesis system. The Nemesis system was an innovative gameplay feature introduced in 2014's Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor, where Uruks who defeat the player in combat climb the ranks of their internal hierarchy and become more powerful adversaries in future clashes. More to the point, if they survive an encounter with the player, well, they will remember it for the rematch and adapt their strategy accordingly, and perhaps even show up to battle sporting injuries from the previous fight. It's a mechanic that helped the game world feel alive, and every Uruk seemed like more than just merely disposable rent-a-goons, enough so that many players hope to see the feature become gaming's next biggest universal one. But Warner Bros. Ultimately prevented this by taking a patent out on the Nemesis system, enough to seemingly scare off any developer from attempting to imitate it. It's all the more frustrating given that Warner Bros. Hasn't done anything with the Nemesis system since Middle-earth sequel Shadow of War back in 2017, so they're basically sitting on an incredible gameplay mechanic and not even fully exploiting it for their own gain. All the same, it feels that there must be a way for creative developers to mimic Nemesis in a non-litigious way, borrowing the seeds of the idea yet executing it differently so not to be legally actionable. At this point, Nemesis is so well known that it feels unfair for Warner Bros. To have a monopoly on it, especially if they've done nothing with it effectively for over 5 years. Without video games building on the beloved mechanics of other prior games, the medium wouldn't be nearly as dynamic as it is today. Nemesis would work so incredibly well for a wide variety of genres, from action games to beat-em-ups to racers, so to wall it off feels like a huge disservice to gaming as a whole. Number 4. Skip gameplay segment. Now here's a feature that showed up just recently in the new indie adventure game Chia, and would be great to see in more games, being able to skip a given gameplay segment. Now while playing this game, at any time players can hit the pause button and if they find a particular gameplay sequence boring or frustrating, can simply skip it and move on to the next one. Given that the game features a large number of fairly dull repetitive fetch quests, being able to speed past these sequences with a mere press of a button is a hugely considerate feature. And though the ability to skip gameplay will be controversial to some, with the potential to miss out on story beats and some developers wanting you to experience everything that they've slaved away to create, if somebody paid money to play a game, why not let them play through it however they want? We've all played great games with 1 or 2 majorly frustrating sequences, for example some obnoxiously tricky stealth levels or escort missions, and so being able to wave the flag of surrender and just jump past them or let the game autoplay them, well that is a terrifically consumer-friendly feature. Number 3. Map annotation. Almost every video game that isn't a totally linear corridor simulator will feature a map of some kind, so why not give players the ability to annotate it? For instance, Divinity Original Sin 2 and the Nintendo DS Zelda games allow the player to add notes to the game map to aid them during gameplay, perhaps to provide a reminder of the enemies awaiting them in a dungeon or what have you. While writing and drawing generally doesn't feel great on consoles with a controller, even on PC it's a feature which feels egregiously underused. Considering how few games follow the lead of the Silent Hill series and auto-update the map depending on the player's progress, why not offer the option to add notes and diagrams to the map should we so wish? Instead, the majority of games force you to interact with their maps in an extremely restricted way, limited to placing waypoints and generally not a whole lot else. Number 2. Pause, skip, rewind, and restart cutscenes. It's absolutely maddening that in 2023, the overwhelming majority of video games still don't give players extensive control of cutscenes. In the scope of gaming, the ability to pause cutscenes is a relatively new one, perhaps popularized by Metal Gear Solid 4 back in 2008. And I guess because if you're going to serve up an hour-long cutscene cinematic, you better let players pause it to go to the bloody bathroom. And yet, just mere months ago, Marvel's Midnight Suns bafflingly released without the ability to pause cutscenes, and despite months of fans complaining about it, the feature still hasn't been patched in. But it goes beyond the mere ability to pause. Ideally, we should be freely able to skip, rewind, and even restart a cutscene at will, as well as being able to rewatch any previously viewed cinematic in a cutscene viewer. While there are certainly mechanical considerations where rewinding real-time cutscenes is concerned, it's tough to accept that this isn't a widespread feature in the modern gaming era. Skipping a cutscene is at least relatively common, and games like The Last of Us Part 2 handily allow you to restart an entire cutscene should you so wish, but overall, more games need to give players much greater control of in-game cinematics. And number 1, quit to desktop. And finally, here's one for the PC gamers out there, being able to instantly quit to desktop from the game's pause menu. As simple a feature as this sounds, there are a shocking number of AAA games in particular that require you first to exit to the main menu, and only then are you able to quit the game outright. Now, cynically, it feels like a cheap psychological tactic intended to keep players playing for longer, because if they have to spend added seconds closing the game down during, say, a frustrating boss fight, they're probably more likely to just stick with it. And while many games at least let you press Alt F4 to kill the current active window, in recent years an increasing number of titles have actually disabled this shortcut while the game is running. PC gaming is supposed to be more versatile than its console counterpart, but making players jump through hoops just to quit the damn game does make it feel like quite the opposite. And there we go, my friends. Those were 10 incredible video game mechanics that should be everywhere, but aren't. I hope that you enjoyed that, and please let me know what you thought about it down in the comment section below. As always, I've been Jules, and you can go follow me over on Twitter and Instagram, where it's @RetroJ, but the O is a 0. Hope to see you over there. But before I go, I just want to say one thing. Hope you're treating yourself well with love and respect, my friends, because you deserve all the best things in life, alright? And do not let anything or anyone else tell you otherwise. You are a massive lad, alright? Now I want you to go out there and utterly smash it today. I believe in you. As always, I've been Jules. You have been awesome. Never forget that. And I'll speak to you soon. Bye.